managed to lose 50 kilograms of weight. Previously, I weighed 120 kilograms at a height of 160, that is, twice my weight. These were the worst days of my life, but I managed to surpass myself. Want a personal motivation story? Then watch this video and put class. My name is Leah. I was born already a large child. My weight was almost 5 kilos with a height of 50 centimeters. My mother often told me how every month it became more difficult for her to lift me in her arms. In kindergarten, I was considered the plumpest girl. It's not just about the wide bone, as they say. My parents tell me that I had a great appetite. I ate absolutely everything in a row, but unfortunately, our family did not particularly like fruits or vegetables. More often, there was junk food on the table. In addition to meat, there were a lot of flour products and a lot of sweets. I was gaining more and more pounds, and it was getting harder to move. So, by the end of school, I weighed almost 90 kilos. Against the background of thin classmates, I began to feel depressed, although it was as long as I can remember. And then I could not even pick up a beautiful ball gown. I could only fit into a tracksuit, and even the teachers didn't tell me anything about the dress code at school because they saw how fat I was. This pity on the part of the adults only made me feel worse. The family only avoided this topic, but refused to eat healthy food. I dieted 1,000,000 times and broke down, then gained twice as much as I lost. Because of complexes before the prom night, I began to eat even more and gained another 5 kilos. For this reason, I decided not to go there at all. Because I thought too much about my figure, my academic performance was poor. I didn't have any friends, and I didn't play sports, so I didn't even count on a scholarship. 3 of the colleges have denied me admission due to objective reasons. Who needs a student with 0 achievements? My parents were willing to buy my education and pay for college, but I was ashamed of them and myself. I felt worthless. One day, sitting at the TV late at night, eating another batch of buns, I saw on TV a display of beautiful evening dresses and suddenly realized that I don't have any dresses. I've had wide-leg trousers and t-shirts all my life. I stopped and looked at myself in the mirror. At that moment, I saw not only a fat body full of despair, but loneliness for the rest of my life. If I live at this pace, I will not only have no friends, but also love. I was suddenly afraid, and this fear grew with every spoonful of junk food. That night, I kept a notebook for myself where I wrote down my plans, food plan, lifestyle, and goal. I clearly scheduled everything by day of the week so as to not allow myself to snap again. The next day, I signed up for a gym that was far from home. I specifically chose one to walk back and forth. The first day I met the coach, his name was Noah. He understood me without a word and immediately drew up a program of classes. At first, it was very difficult for me. I felt the weight of my body. I was suffering from shortness of breath. My muscles were flabby like jelly. It was difficult for me among people I didn't know. All these new simulators. I didn't know what to do with them. I was very lost. My hands were shaking because I couldn't do it after 2 weeks of classes. So I came out after another failure in the hall and just roared. "Nothing will help me now. I was born fat and I will die fat," I said aloud. At that moment, my coach came up to me. Noah said that working on yourself is the most difficult and showed me his photos. No, it can't be. He was even fatter than me. I weighed 200 kilograms. Only at that moment, I had a wife and child. At some point, I got depressed just like you were eating. I ate everything, but especially a lot of hamburgers. Unbeknownst to me, I had grown so fat that I could no longer walk. Of course, I stopped working, and my wife had to support me, the child, and herself. It was hard for her, but she was silent and worked. I saw it all and hated myself even more. And then I left, so as to not hang a weight on the fragile shoulders of my beloved, he said. I asked what happened next. He said that now I see another person, strong in body and spirit. I showed you the photo, not so that you lose weight, but so that you don't give up. I have changed now. I started earning money by playing sports, but I still can't get my family back because I lost it over the years. I can't go in there now, and you don't give up. Don't make my mistakes before it's too late, he said. These words made me think about a lot. I came home and opened my notebook again. All the next day, I faithfully fulfilled all the tasks of the trainer, not sparing myself or the simulators. When I thought my heart was going to burst from the strain, I would stop, take a deep breath, and start again a few minutes later. My clothes were soaked with sweat, and my lungs were ready to burst with oxygen. But I didn't stop. About a month later, I got on the scales and I saw that I weighed not 120, but 100 kilos! Minus 20 kilos! Yeah! I screamed in tears. I couldn't believe that I had lost as much as 20 kilos in 1 month. It was only at that moment that I noticed that I had been strapping my old pants with a belt for a long time, and my t-shirt was waving like a sail. It's time for you to go shopping, Noah said, smiling. In a rush of joy, I threw myself at him and hugged him. But this was not the limit. The next day, my mother and I went shopping, where I bought a new tracksuit. My mother asked me why I didn't buy a dress like I wanted, but I said I would only do it after I lost another 30 kilos. On the way home, she told me that she and my father were more proud of me than ever. I was happy to hear that. Well then, we went on another level of my diet and exercise. I took a double load. Over time, I noticed that sports became a way of life for me. I no longer wanted to eat unhealthy. Bad mood just because I was almost always happy. I had the pleasure aching pain in the muscles from easy dinner with a salad. Several times I was approached on the street on the way to the gym to get acquainted. Attention from the outside attracted not only elastic ass, I think I shone from the inside. After 2.5 months of intensive training, I achieved my result. My weight was 70 kilograms. After the weigh-in, I invited Noah home to celebrate. I introduced him to my parents. We had a lovely evening. The coach said I was his best student. And at the end of the dinner, my mother gave me a gift. She bought me a black evening dress, the first in my life. It was beautiful. I tearfully hugged my parents, then put on my new clothes as soon as possible. And you know, this dress has become a symbol of the will to win and work on yourself. This feeling when the back zipper closes without any problems in the back and does not cut into the fat is incomparable, I whispered to my mother. Then Noah and I went straight to the club. He said that people should see me today. Now it's time for a new life.
Do you have a little brother or sister? How do you feel about them? Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were left alone without them? My name is Mark. I want to tell you about my sister, or rather, why I hated her. Usually when another child is born in the family, it is groomed and cherished the most. And all because he is small. He is the youngest in the family, and accordingly, he needs more attention than the others. For me, it turned out very differently. When I was born, I wasn't the best. I didn't have any privileges. I didn't get snickered at. I didn't get more toys, and I didn't get more pocket money than my sister. She was more loved than I was. I had the feeling that she was younger than I was, although the age difference is 5 years. My sister's name is Alice. No, she's a good person and sometimes a good sister. Sometimes when she was in a good mood, she would bring me home new toys, ice cream, or even give me money. But there were days when she looked awful and acted like a bitch. She could have thrown me out of the room and slammed the door in my face. I didn't understand why her parents didn't scold her at such times. Why did they punish me for any such outbursts? Was she on a special account? But why and how? I remember once I had a birthday, but my parents said that there was no money for the celebration. And I wanted this event so much. I waited a whole year to ask for a new skate as a gift. And then, such a bummer. Naturally, my mood fell. The next day passed as usual, and in the late afternoon, I noticed that my mother was packing a suitcase somewhere. When I asked where she was going, she said that she and Alice should go to another country, and then promised that they would return soon. What? Another country? But how? Why not me? Why her? Why does she always get the best of everything? So they don't have money for a new skate and cake, but they do have money to go to other countries? Why should I do all this? My heart was filled with hatred for Alice that night. I went to her bedroom, watched her pack her own things, and just silently hated her. I have often wondered why they should have another child if there is no place for it in their heart. This unloved, sometimes superfluous member of the family was me. As long as I can remember, I've been trying to figure out the secret of my sister's difference from me. And can everything be simpler? It's just that she's she and I'm I. This continued for several more years, and things got even worse. My parents almost stopped noticing me over the years. I was in the house like a shadow, and I had already learned not to talk to them much, and not to pay attention to the way they hung around this witch. I went to school, did my own homework, signed up for sports clubs, and made plans to get out of the house as soon as possible. Yes, I made a final decision for myself. They will be better off without me, or rather, they will not even notice my absence. I just needed to find a place to live and some part-time work for minors. I waited for the day when my mom and dad left on some business. They promised to return late at night. I picked up my duffel bag from under the bed and headed for the exit. As I was walking down the hall, Alice noticed me. "Hey Mark, where are you going?" she asked me. I was rude when I said it was none of her business. "What difference does it make? Do you care?" I shouted back. Alice made a surprised face, came up to me and asked why I was angry and rude to her. This question enraged me even more. I realized that the silence accumulated over the past months was about to tear me apart. And I gave in to emotions and I told my favorite parents everything I thought about my family. You ask why I'm angry? Because I don't exist in your fucking family. You live your own life. Parents have recently ceased to be interested in how I'm doing. You sit down to dinner separately, separate from me. When I get home, no one even yells, "Mark, hi, how you doing?" And no one asks me how I'm doing at school. Do any of you know that I'm captain of the high school basketball team? Did you know that I've been going to a music club for a year now and I've learned to play the guitar? Yes, I learned to cook food myself with the help of Google. And all because you are not near me. You then with your father, then with your mother, travel around the world, go to some countries and do not even tell where you rested? And I wasn't even taken once. And then you ask why I'm angry? Maybe because I'm not your family, I shouted. I was yelling so hard that I thought my lungs were going to explode from the strain. I blushed and my eyes were streaming with tears. The resentment I had accumulated over the years spoke to me. Alice just stood there looking at me and crying. She just said, "I'm sorry," in a low voice. "Is that all? I'm sorry?" I asked her. She roared louder than me, slammed the door to the room, and cried. I didn't know what was going on. It turns out that my parents were standing behind me. They looked very depressed. Mom was crying too, and then she and Dad took me to the kitchen. My father said they had a serious conversation for me. I was prepared to hear that I was not their own child, that they had taken me for a fool, and now they were sorry and I had to leave. "Your sister has cancer," my mother said. She wept even louder. Dad put his arm around her, but he didn't look up from the floor. At that moment, I felt sick. I was prepared for anything but this news. Suddenly, I felt hurt, ashamed, and angry at the same time. "She was diagnosed with the disease a couple months before you were born, and your dad and I threw all our energy into her treatment. Alice was looking forward to your birth. When you were in my tummy, she read you her favorite stories every day. In the countries we went to, she received chemotherapy, after which she was very ill for a while. She sometimes couldn't even walk on her own, so she often kept the door to her room closed or maliciously kicked you out. She just forbade us to tell you about it because she wanted you not to be sad," my mother said. Then she pointed out that she was very sorry for me because when they saved one child, they did not notice how they destroyed another, me. I don't think I felt any worse. You can't imagine how bad I felt at that moment. I thought of such terrible things. I hated Alice, and I did everything I could to offend her. I just looked at my parents and cried. My sister came up behind me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't say a word. She calmed me down and said it was all her own fault. "I still love you, you stupid boy," she said, and laughed. That night, for the first time in my life, I had such a long, open, honest, and frank conversation. All I asked was that you let me take care of her. Now, in all her chemo sessions, I was there for her, feeding her, reading her books, playing the guitar, singing songs. A few more years passed. Alice still has to undergo intensive treatment, but I'm happier than ever because I can be near my sister, whom I love more than anyone in the world. I am the son of a senator. How does that sound to you? Sure, it does. This automatically assumes a green light in all directions. And you know what? Being the son of a senator is much cooler than being a senator yourself. Would you like to visit my place and feel what it's like? I will tell you an unforgettable story. My name is Dima. I was born and raised in a family of politicians and businessmen. In principle, it is the same. So my great-grandfather and grandfather were officials or deputies. They didn't exactly dream about it. It just happened that life decided for them. Here is how I, for example, grew up the son of a senator. Did anyone ask me that? You will think that I am the greedy child of a rich father, a people's thief, a corrupt official. I will not comment or justify anything to my parents. I will only say that there is a downside, but about everything in order. As a toddler, I didn't understand all the possibilities I had. I had food, toys, parents, a house, everything for school, but I considered it mundane. When I got a little older, I started having companies, a lot of companies. Everyone wanted to be friends with me. I was popular. I had the coolest car in school and an expensive phone. Then I got a taste of parties. At first, all this caused great excitement. Every night we would go together with friends and I would drive them around the city, or we would go to a club and hang out until the morning. I felt all powerful. I always got away with any kind of jams. Broke a window at school, Dad paid. Broke someone else's car, Dad paid. Beat someone, Dad paid. I didn't need a woman's attention because that was enough. Girls don't need much. I gave them flowers, phones, clothes, just gave them money, and they were mine. It was so simple. Over time, easy accessibility became annoying. I wanted something more extreme, interesting. And one day, after leaving the club, I came up with a crazy idea. My friends and I had a bet that I could surprise them within an hour. So the first thing I saw on the street was an ambulance. It was parked at one of the entrances. My friends were looking at me, and I stole the car. It was just open. I turned on the signals and drove at full speed. Damn, it was something. I was laughing. On the way, I gave everyone the middle finger. I didn't care because I was invincible. Of course, the car was found later, but they figured me out. As always, the police came home. I opened the door, and they began to rub me something about a number of violations. I yawned back at them and asked sleepily, "How much?" Money decides everything. But then my father came up to me, and of course, all the employees knew him. They immediately told me what I had done. My father took a deep breath. I know that look. It meant that he was displeased with me. He'll probably threaten to block all my payment cards again, take my car, and so on. That's not all. He didn't just steal a car, the ambulance was on the road, and the doctors had to hospitalize a seriously ill child. When they reached the street, the car was gone. In general, that child got worse. The parents went to see her son, they said. Damn, I thought, but not that. Can I get away with it this time? I thought. After the police had left, telling me to report to the police station and visit the family on my own, my father called me into his office. I sat down in a chair, and Dad took out the alcohol, poured it into a glass, and drank it in one gulp. When you were born, I couldn't believe my luck. I promised myself right away that I would give you everything you ever wanted, but especially a choice. The ability to choose your own path in life. Choose everything from the style of clothing, school, profession. I didn't have that. You know, your grandfather and his father were unwavering. They chose the future for their children. The road was predetermined, but I didn't want to be stewed in this mess. I wanted to be an architect. Even just secretly signed up for a course. Of course, my father found out about it and was furious, my father began to say. I wasn't sure what he was getting at, but then father said that he was forced to become a senator, that is, to follow in the family footsteps. And when I was born, he said he wouldn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do. Every time before I buy something for you, or choose an educational institution, I asked you, suggested options, and asked your opinion. Have you ever felt violated? What happened to you, son? Why did you do this? He asked. I didn't know what to say. Perhaps he gave me too much choice. I was just bored and didn't want anyone to get hurt. I went out of my father's study, drooping in myself, and locked myself in my room. I've never felt worse. I had nothing to say for myself. This time, he didn't go to the station to solve my problems. I understood everything, packed up and went myself. I was fined and told to work community service hours. Yes, I didn't hold a broom with a rod in my hands, but I didn't say anything. Then I went to the hospital to see the family. This was the most difficult test. I was trembling with excitement. Found the room and saw that there was a boy about 6 years old. Next to him, his mother. She was asleep, sitting on a chair. She woke up when I came in and didn't know who I was. I barely had the heart to tell her who I was. There was so much anger in her eyes. She turned to me and slapped me a few times. I was just silent and didn't move. She had every right to do so. In our room, the nurses immediately gathered and took me out. She barely managed to calm down. She called me almost a murderer and chased me away. It's a good thing no one there knew who my father was. I didn't want him to suffer for my thoughtlessness. Then I went up to the chief doctor and found out the boy's diagnosis. Turns out he needed an expensive operation. I didn't hesitate to ask how much. I needed a lot of money. After I got out of the hospital, I went straight to Max's. Max is an old friend of mine. He's been looking at my car for a long time, so I sold it on the spot, took the money and went back to the hospital, put the wad of money in an envelope on the doctor's desk, and told him to do the operation immediately. Then I asked not to tell my name to the boy's parents. When I got home, my friends called me. They've lost me since yesterday. I felt so bad that I wanted to share it with someone, and I told them everything. The only response I got was, "What are we going to do today?" That's when I realized that no, they are not friends. I hung up and went to bed. After this situation, I did not leave the house for some time, only worked public working hours. I didn't talk to anyone at home. Then I went back to the hospital where I found out that the operation was performed on the boy and it was successful. You can't imagine how happy I was to hear that. Did I ever manage not to screw up? Elated, I ran out of the hospital and ran to my dad's office. Emotionally, I told him the good news and hugged him. Then I apologized for everything. Dad was silent for a long time, but then he said that he was proud of me. It was then that I realized what I wanted to do in the future. After leaving school, I went to university, and after that, I opened a small charity fund to help sick children. Hi, my name is Nick. I was born and raised in prison, and then I was supposed to be sent home to relatives. But I chose boarding school, and now I will tell you why. As my mother said, when she married father, in the family immediately began the problems. Or rather, there were detractors who constantly quarreled with their parents. My dad had a brother, Uncle Chris. He often came to visit us, sometimes to borrow money, then to eat, then to sleep. He didn't work and didn't have a family. My mother thinks that he was jealous of his brother and therefore drank even more. My father loved him and therefore never refused to help. One day my father was offered a good job in another city. It was necessary to go there for the whole week and return home only on weekends. Since the earnings were good, Dad agreed and we didn't see each other 5 days a week. As soon as Uncle Chris found out that Dad was not there, he began to visit us even more often, under the pretext of looking after us. At that moment, my mother was already pregnant with me, although there was no help from him. His mother could not expel him either, out of respect for Dad. Sometimes Uncle Chris could just stay at our house without asking. This irritated my mother terribly. She and Dad even had a fight about it once. He didn't want to listen to Mother in any way. "He is my only brother, and I will take care of him," my father shouted. Well, then Father began to have difficulties at work. He began to come less often, and Uncle Chris stayed more often. So, under the influence of alcohol, he began to molest Mother and harass her. My mother was in a position where she was afraid he might hurt me. Uncle beat her on the back and head, and my mother did everything so that he did not touch her stomach. At some point, she ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Before he could raise his fist again, she stabbed him. He fell. My mother called an ambulance. When the police arrived, my uncle shouted that she had attacked him and wanted to kill him. My father refused to come after hearing that my mother tried to kill his brother, and my mother was put in prison. That's where I was born. My mother named me after her father. I don't know how it all looked from the outside, but my mom says that my appearance on the bill was supposed to be the best moment of her life, and it was ruined. The fact is that when my mother had contractions for several hours in a row, there was a security next to her all the time. The doctor was late somewhere, and there was no other. During this time, something went wrong with my mother, and she began to lose a lot of blood. People in uniform saw it and did nothing. And when the doctor came and examined her, my mother was handcuffed to the bed so that she wouldn't hurt them or the doctor. Usually when a mother gives birth, her baby is put on her breast. I was deprived of such a moment completely. They took you almost immediately and didn't tell me where you were going. I wasn't even allowed to feed you. I screamed, got angry, and cried, but no one listened to me. I was lying on the bed and just sobbing. I demanded that you be returned, she said. Postpartum recovery takes more than a month. During this time, women should rest, eat well, and not be nervous. My mother was kicked out of work 3 days later. She could not see me again until the next day. I don't know what you were fed or if you were fed at all, but when I did take you in my arms, I finally felt calm. It did not last long. You were ill. You had a fever. I was really scared. For hours I begged for water and a doctor, but my screams were cut off by a rude remark or a blow on the bars with a club. I tried to feed you as much as possible with my milk, but it was not enough, because I did not eat well. You cried a lot and it broke my heart. Women who were in exactly the same situation, with children and behind bars, understood each other perfectly. They were the only ones who helped those who had no relatives. When their relatives brought some things for their kids, or for them, and needed something to eat, they always shared it with me. I was grateful for their gestures, my mother said. Also, according to her, those prisoners wouldn't have done anything like this if it wasn't for the motive for her attempt on my uncle. The prison has its own rules and regulations. I am not talking about the fact that people there observe a special regime. They have their own rules in addition to the basic ones. Each cell has its own rules. For example, in my mother's case, women who heard her story that she almost killed her husband's brother because he attempted to kill her child aroused respect. For this reason, my mother was not touched. But among the other, there were those women who were convicted of horrible crimes, infanticide, for example. They were not liked there. They were not allowed to eat at the common table. They slept on the floor and were treated like dogs. And everything that relatives brought was taken away from them. When I got a little older, it became a little easier. To be honest, since I was born there, on the prison, it seemed to me that this is my home. In fact, it was. My mother and I were always there. In my opinion, there was nothing unusual, because I did not know any other environment. The barbed wire on the high fence didn't bother me. I thought it was necessary. Besides me, there were other children there. We played together while my mother worked. More often, they sewed something. We all wore the same clothes, only sometimes we were visited by other people in more beautiful clothes. They spoke very sternly to us and quickly left. According to the rules, I was only allowed to stay with my mother until I was 3 years old. At the end of the term, my relatives either take me away or send me to a boarding school. My mother said that the day of the separation was the hardest for us. We were both crying. I still remember how bad I felt, how I was afraid to leave my mother. They wanted to give me to my Uncle Chris, as he is a relative. My mother was against it, and I was screaming and hysterical as ever. I didn't want to go to him. Then they decided to transfer me to a boarding school. My mother says that she doesn't know which of the evils was on her at that moment, but she was afraid that Uncle Chris would kill me. That's when I was sent to boarding school. To tell the truth, I didn't see much difference between that house and this one. Here, the order seemed even more disciplined and demanding, because there were more children, and we were already more adults. Yes, here a child of 6 years old on communication poles for 10 years, and all because it is impossible to do otherwise. Otherwise, they will trample. You know, we don't choose our parents. We can't agree or refuse to be born. Sometimes it happens that we have no choice but to accept. whether we want to or not. I don't blame my mom for the fact that has been our fate. Sometimes we are responsible for our parents' mistakes. And yes, I have no idea what life looks like on the other side of the boarding school fence. How does it feel to have a family, your own house, a lot of food and cartoons, not for 20 minutes a day? All I feel right now is longing for my mother, and I can't wait to visit her again.
I'm Belle. I have already won beauty contests of various scales. The fact is that since my childhood, I have been famous for my beauty. Yes, I was born beautiful. Oh no, don't think I'm exaggerating. I was recognized as the most beautiful child at the age of 5. It was an official statement from one of the country's fashion magazines. You will not believe it, but since then, a dark period in my life began. It's hard to be beautiful, especially if your parents are involved. As I said, I was recognized as the most beautiful at the age of 5. How did this happen? I was not even 4 years old when my mother opened an Instagram page on my behalf and kept it. The page quickly gained popularity, subscribers, and likes. Mom was getting into it more and more. Of course, she was proud of her daughter's beauty, but it seemed to be the only thing she was proud of. After a lot of people noticed my beauty and gorgeous hair, my mother came up with the idea to arrange a professional photo shoot. To do this, she hired a photographer and then uploaded the photo to social networks. Just a week ago, I was noticed not by ordinary internet users, but by stylists, makeup artists, and editors of fashion glossy magazines. I remember how my mother began to call from morning to night with offers to take pictures of me. But one day, they offered to star in a small commercial for children's chocolate. I was happy that I would eat free chocolate because I was promised a whole box. And my mother was happy that she was promised around some if she agreed to make her daughter the face of this product. Of course, we were all in the black. My mother took me to the studio, where they dressed me up in different clothes for an hour, painted my face, and I learned a little text and had to say it to the camera. Everything was easy and simple. I really like the atmosphere there. There are lights everywhere, light bulbs, cameras, people. Everyone was running around me, and all I had to do was eat chocolate, smile, and look at the camera. At the end of the day, as agreed, each of us with my mother got their own. After this idea, even more people noticed me. We received several more offers, and then more and more. My family made a good income from these films, but my mother was the happiest. She was so proud of me. At home, all the family members kept talking about my beauty. And once, my mother was offered the idea that I would participate in a beauty contest. This event was organized by the mayor's office of our city. Naturally, my mother was fired with the idea, especially since the main prize was a huge TV. I was very worried because it was my first beauty contest. When I got there, I saw so many girls. They were all beautiful. I even thought they were more beautiful than me. To my happiness, one beauty was not enough, and the participants had to pass some tests and complete a couple of tasks. I managed everything, but it wasn't easy. My family kept shouting my name from the audience. They supported me as much as they could. At the end of the competition, I took first place. "This is my daughter!" My mother screamed. I was crying and proud of myself. We arrived home happy with a huge new TV. A month later, my mother told me that I was waiting for another shoot, and then again a beauty contest. What? Again? Mom, don't we have enough money? And the TV hasn't broken yet, I said. But my mother quickly shut me up. She argued that my career is just beginning, and there are many more such as shootings, competitions, and photo sessions ahead of us. I understood that she wanted to earn as much as possible, and I wanted more dresses and toys. But I did not think that just a photo shoot can be so tiring. Over time, she became obsessed with my appearance. She forbade me to play outside because she was afraid that I might get hurt, or worse, hurt my face. She took me to the beauty salon 3 to 4 times a week to have my hair washed and styled. I changed dress after dress, shoes after shoes. I think I was already automatically posing for the camera, like a robot. And when I thought that this was the last photo shoot, another beauty contest was approaching. Everything was repeated. I showed myself, walked, answered a lot of questions, danced, said some phrase at the end and won. And you know, the more I won, the more my mother wanted to be famous. At some point, I even thought that she was forcing me to participate not because of my bright future or even because of money, but simply because it was her hidden childhood dream, and now she is implementing it through her daughter. This went on several years. Over the years, I only become more beautiful and I participate in competitions more often. I was so tired that I wish I didn't look like this. So, on one of these crazy days, my mother came up to me and said that there was another contest coming and I should participate. But how, Mom? It's going to be my birthday. Can I at least once over the years not participate in the competition? And normally celebrate my birthday, invite my friends, who I have almost no laugh and relax? I asked. My mother was angry at this and said that any girl would want to be in my place. And I just got too fat. When I heard these words, it seemed to me that I had already lost my value as her daughter. She probably forgot that I was a child first. I locked myself in my room and went on a head strike. My mother just screamed that I was spoiled and that sooner or later I would leave the room and then I wouldn't be happy. At the same time, she promised to burn all my dresses and shoes. But I didn't care about them anymore. I sat there all day. There was a knock on the door and I yelled for my mother to leave. But it was my father. I let him in, and he brought me my favorite sandwich and milk. Everything as I like it. Don't be mad at your mother and eat. I don't know how to cook anything else, so I will make dinner for you, he said. Then Dad said that he was very worried for me. I can see how tired you are. Sometimes I just want to take you to Disneyland, even though you're already making money. Mom forgot that you're just a kid. I'll talk to her. I should have done this a long time ago, he said. I burst into tears and said that they were the best words that I was waiting for them. Then I ate my dinner and went to bed. The next day, I went down for breakfast. My mom and dad were fighting a lot at that moment. My mother accused him of meddling and that she gave birth to me, not him. I heard those terrible words and I felt so bad. Enough, I shouted. Enough, Mother. I will participate. Don't worry. Have it your way, I said. Dad started to object, but I waved him away. My mother calmed down and went to her room. I began to prepare and came up with something. I decided to finally give up my career in order to live a normal life. I wanted to have a childhood. One day, when the competition started, I cut my hair in the dressing room at random while no one was looking, and went on stage in this image. The judges were stunned, and my mother seemed to faint. The host couldn't find the words to express his emotion, but I snatched the microphone out of his hands and told him that this was my way of protesting to all those parents for whom the promotion of children's career has replaced motherhood. I want a normal childhood. I'm sorry, Mom, but you probably forgot that I'm a child first. I love you, but I can't just be beautiful anymore. After all, I'm your daughter, I said, and left the stage. My dad met me on the way out and took me home, and we picked up a bunch of hamburgers on the way out. Oh, it's been a long time since I've eaten fast food. A couple of hours later, my mother came home. I was all ready for a universal scandal, but she suddenly came to me, hugged me, and asked for forgiveness. I was touched. Since then, before deciding anything for me, she first consulted with me.